Hey everyone! So today I'm going to be doing a solve with me where I'm going to be solving the SAT practice test 1 math section. No calculator. Sorry, that's a lot to remember. You can find this test on SAT's website. It will probably be there whenever you find this video because it's been up there for years, like the same exact test. They actually have 8 practice tests that you can solve with the answers, with a score sheet, so it's really helpful. Maybe you're studying for the SAT, or maybe you're just curious of how you would do on it as an adult. As we go, I'm going to give you as many tips as I can that I would give to my own students. If you're new to this channel, my name is Janice and I'm a tutor, and I've tutored the SAT, ACT, and a lot of other different subjects. So I'm excited to have you if you're interested in problem solving, test taking, intelligence, IQ testing, all those kinds of topics. Please subscribe because I post new videos every week. Okay, so let's get started. Here you're looking at the math test, no calculator section. You have 20 questions and 25 minutes to solve it in. Now, the first 15 are multiple choice and the next 5 are fill-ins. This is important to know actually. It goes from easy to hard as you go through, but then when you get to the fill-ins, it resets back to easy to hard. So you definitely don't want to spend all your time trying to get the hardest problem in the multiple choice and then forgetting to do those really easy first couple problems in the fill-ins. So with that in mind, let's get started. As you can see, they show you some formulas here, which of course I recommend that you memorize those because 25 minutes is not a lot of time, especially when you're under pressure and stress. So I recommend memorizing these formulas instead of having to go back and reference them all the time. Okay, so like I said, these first few, they've done studies. This is how they come up with the difficulty actually, is they test this on real people and they see how many actually solve it. So you should keep this in mind that if an answer seems really easy and obvious in the beginning, that's probably the right answer. If it's easy and obvious at the end of the test, it's probably not, unless you see the trick of what most students would do and then not do that, if that makes sense. All right, here we go. I'm going to zoom in. Okay, this is just your basic algebra problem. So most students, by the time that they're taking the SAT, about junior year, this should be very, very easy. In fact, a middle school student would probably find this problem very easy. I know my 6th grader could definitely solve this. So I'm going to plug in a 3 for K. And then we want to get X by itself, so I'm going to multiply both sides by 3. And then we have X minus 1 equals 9. Add 1 to both sides, and we get X equals 10. Not much more to explain there, pretty straightforward. Okay, let's look at the next problem. Okay, now we have an imaginary number problem, and I find these on the ACT and the SAT. Some students are not familiar with imaginary numbers, and they see this notation, and they get a little bit freaked out because they're like, I equals the square root of -1, and then their mind kind of explodes, and they're like, I never learned this, what's happening? But really, again, this is the second problem on the test, so it's actually a lot easier than it seems. If you look at the answer choices, they all have I in the answer choices, which means you never have to do any substitution at all. You're just going to treat I like it's any other variable, X, Z, Y, whatever you want, and just ignore this whole section where it tells you the square root of -1. That's just there to kind of, I don't know if it's purposely there to throw you off track, but I find that it actually does throw people off track, even though it's more information. So just ignore this. And all we're going to do is simplify the equation they give us. And how do we do that? We combine like terms. So I'm going to rewrite this down here. And let's see, so 7 plus 3i minus 8 plus 9i. And you'll notice because there's a plus sign here, all of the signs remain the same. If this was a negative, I would have to reverse the signs within the parentheses. Okay, now I'm going to combine my like terms. So a 7 and a negative 8 makes a negative 1. A positive 3i, a positive 9i. That's going to be a positive 12i. And as you can see, A is my answer. That's all you have to do. So I know you guys can all combine like terms. So don't get scared off by this crazy equation that they give you. Okay, number 3. Okay, right away, I'm noticing a few things. One, this is a word problem. So understanding the numbers is very, very important. So on the SAT, they don't just want to know that you're like a monkey that can punch things in and solve the numbers. They want to know that you actually understand what you're solving. So a lot of these word problems are testing understanding. And as I look at these answer choices, I'm seeing that's pretty clear. All they want to know is, can I set up an equation? And this brings me to another important point. Before I get too deep into a problem, I always glance at the answer choices because those give me hints as to what they're looking for. So here, before I go on some kind of tangent trying to solve for an actual number, I'm realizing I don't need to do that. As soon as I set up the equation, I have my answer and I can move forward. Now, having said that, these problems can be tricky for students. Why? They're not used to doing problems like this in school. And a lot of them are not taught how to do this. So I'm going to give you a shortcut on how to do these that's kind of like foolproof. And it may take like a few more seconds than actually logically working through it for some of you. For others, it's really nice because when you're under the pressure of a test, you want like a proven method and you want to be able to follow it exactly. So here's my method. Whenever I have these variables, I set a value for them. So I have two variables, m and p, and as long as you don't choose 0 or 1, you're in the clear. And as I solve, you're going to realize why 0 and 1 are not good ideas. Okay, so I'm going to keep it really simple. I'm going to say, actually, that's another tip. You don't want to pick like some crazy difficult number like 729. You want to keep it really easy. So m equals 2, p equals 3. And I'm picking two different numbers. That way I can keep which one's straight in my mind. So then I'm going to replace those in the problem itself. And I'm going to read it assuming those are my answers. On Saturday afternoon, Armand sent 2 text messages each hour for 5 hours. So that's pretty easy. That would be 10 texts total. And then Tyrone sent 3 text messages each hour for 4 hours. So that would be 12 texts total. And then the problem wants to know what is the total number. And then of course we just add these and we get 22 text messages total. Now, how does this help me solve the problem? Well, I'm going to plug in a 2 for M, a 3 for P, and see which of these answer choices gives me 22. And it actually goes a lot faster than it sounds, because right away we know that 9 times 2 times 3 is not going to be 22. I don't even need to figure out what that number is. I just know it's not 22. Same with, I know 20 times 2 times 3 is not going to be 22. So I try not to waste my time doing calculations on this test that are not going to help me get to the answer. So even though I could do that very quickly, there's no point, so I'm not going to waste my energy on that. So it's going to be C or D, and probably logically you can guess that it would be C because the 5 hours relates to Armand and M, and the 4 hours relates to Tyrone and P. But let's say we're not even going to do that. I'm just going to plug in and double check my work. So I'm going to put in a 2 for M, and then a 3 for P, which gives us 10 plus 12, and that's 22, and that's my right answer. Okay, so that's like a quick little shortcut you can use for these types of problems, especially if they trip you up a lot. And sometimes they come up much harder towards the end of the section. So you'll notice if you take a lot of these practice tests, they'll test the same subject matter, but the difficulty might be different. So instead of this being the third problem on the test, it might come near the end and they might make it much more complicated. However, the strategy will still work. Okay, again, here we have another word problem. Before we get too deep, I'm going to look at what my answer choices are. Okay, so right away I can tell that they want me to figure out what the 108 means. Again, there's no mathematical solving here. I'm using my own logic and looking at the equation they give me to figure out what the 108 means. The other thing I want to point out is on the SAT, they're going to give you realistic problems. What I mean by that is the answer choices when you have some of these real world problems have to make sense. So the test makers don't make like ridiculously strange things that don't make sense. I'll give you an example, like, you know, if they want to know how fast does the car drive and you get an answer like 5,023 miles per hour, it's not the right answer. Okay, they're going to make it logical. Okay, so right away I can tell. I mean, I haven't even read the problem, and it says Kathy repairs phones at a rate of 108 per hour. So I'm going to eliminate this answer choice. This is not something the SAT would give you because, again, it's just ridiculous. Like, nobody can repair 108 phones per hour. That means she'd be repairing a phone in like half a minute, okay? It's just not realistic. Same with repairing 108 phones per day. That's extreme. I'm not going to mark it off, but I really, if I was taking this test, I'd be shocked if that was the answer, and I haven't even read the problem yet because that's just so extreme. And the other two make sense. 108 phones a week, that would make sense. Or completing the repairs within 108 days, that would make some sense. So here we go. Let's read it together. This is interesting. The number of phones she has left to fix. So the P stands for how many are remaining, and D is the number of days in the week. So what it looks like is 23 is how many she does per day. So we know D is definitely wrong. 108 per day sounded ridiculous. And to get the final day, I need to know, or how many phones left, sorry. I need to know how many she starts with. So this would have to be B. She starts with 108 phones. Then we subtract how many she completes per day, which is 23 per day. And then we get how many she has left. Let's go to the next page. I think one of the challenges of a test like this is, again, we're not used to constantly switching topics. So normally when we have a math test in school, it's on a very specific thing, like right triangles, and the whole test is just on right triangles, or the whole test is just on trigonometry, or just on algebra. The difficulty here is that we keep switching between different math topics, and it makes it harder on your brain. So the kids that are really going to do well are the ones that have a really good foundation in all areas of math and are comfortable knowing how the areas are interconnected. So here we're switching gears completely again, and we get this really, really crazy long thing with variables. Now, I want to tell you something else about this test. The problems are designed to be done very, very quickly, okay? So you have like a little over a minute per problem. So if it looks like super crazy, it's actually usually much easier. We're only on problem 5. So don't get intimidated by how a problem looks. This is just a simple problem where we're combining like terms. That's it. So what they're testing you on is, do you know what terms can be combined and which ones can't? That's all they're testing you on. So here, notice I have a subtraction sign that comes before my parentheses, which means I'm going to have to switch to the opposite sign for everything in the parentheses here. So I'm going to rewrite this problem switching the sign. Okay, so let's start with the first part. That part does not change. So x squared times y minus 3y squared plus 5x y squared. Now here the changing happens. Instead of minus x squared y, we're going to have plus x squared y. Then we're going to have minus 3xy squared and then plus 3y squared. I'm running out of room here. Okay, now we're going to combine like terms. So I have, let's switch colors here so we can see it easier. I have a y squared here and a y squared here. That means I can combine them. And this makes it super easy. This is a negative 3 here, and I have a positive 3 there. So these two are going to cancel out. Now for clarity, let's just rewrite this again. X squared y plus 5xy squared plus x squared y minus 3xy squared. Okay, now let's combine more like terms. I'm noticing this term and this term can be combined, and that would give us 2, oops. There we go. That would give us, sorry guys. Somehow I got on the crayon. Okay, 2xy squared. So I combine those. And then these last two terms I can also combine because they're xy squared. So I have a positive 5 and a negative 3. And that would give me 2. So I'm going to add 2xy squared. And that would be my final answer. It's important to know that these final two terms you cannot combine. These are different terms. You cannot add them together. So the correct answer is C. Problem number 5. Okay, we're given an equation and then we're told that h is the height of a boy in terms of the boy's age in the years between 2 and 5. Based on the model, what is the estimated increase in inches of a boy's height each year? So I know year is A, so right away I know this has to be 3 because it's the number, it's the right next to the year. So we're going to get 3 inches of height per year and then adding it to 28.6 to get the final height. So it's 3. It's also interesting to note that none of the other choices are even in the equation at all. So that's another little tip. If you're not sure and you're going to guess, at least pick a number that's in the equation. Okay, here's another one of these that they it looks so much scarier than it is, guys. This looks absolutely terrifying, and I promise you it's not. They have one of these on almost every test, something very, very similar. They want to find P in terms of these other variables. If you notice the answer choices, notice how here we have M equals something, but yet all the answer choices have a P equals something. So literally all you have to do is use algebra to rearrange the formula so that it's P equal to something else. Okay. So what you can do here is in the formula I'm multiplying by P. So if I'm trying to get p on the other side by itself, actually, here's something even easier. Let's first multiply both sides by the bottom, this whole bottom term. So that would put, if I'm multiplying it, that would put it here, you know, next to the m. Now this top part, in order to get p by itself, it has to be divided. So that's actually going to go on the bottom. So all we're going to have is an m, and then we're flip-flopping the terms. And then when I look at these answer choices, obviously this is wrong, this is wrong. And then when I look at these last two, this is the only choice that does the little flip-flop, where the top goes to the bottom and the bottom goes to the top. So another way to make this simple is you can give the top its own variable. So you could say this whole top equals x. So the whole top equals x, the whole bottom equals y. And then to get p by itself, you'd have to multiply by y, right? ym equals xp, and divide by x to cancel out. So you get ym over x equals p. And then I'd go back and I'd see like, okay, x represents this two-figure thing, and that's on the bottom, if that makes sense. So if that's easier for you, you can do it that way. If that second part was confusing, just focus on what I said first and go with that. I know a lot of people are watching this, so I'm trying to give a couple different ways of solving or understanding the problem so that it'll click for different people. Okay, here we go. I love these because they're the ones that aren't word problems tend to be a little bit easier, I think, for most students. So a over b equals 2. What is the value of b for b over a? So if a over b equals 2, then I know that b over a is the inverse, so it would have to be 1 over 2 instead of 2 over 1. And then if I want 4 here, I'd have to multiply both sides by 4. And then I know half of 4 is 2, so my answer is 2. Number 9. Okay, I don't think I've seen a test yet that doesn't have systems of equations. They love systems of equations. The key here is you have to get the variables lined up into their proper columns. So I have, these aren't lined up because I have an x and a y over a y and an x. I want x's on top of each other, y's on top of each other. So I'm just going to rewrite this problem. Lining everything up very nicely. So (3x plus 4y equals negative 23), and then negative x. Notice I have to keep the x with its negative when I move it around, plus 2y equals negative 19. Now, if I add or subtract down, I need it to cancel one of the variables. So if I just do it straight like this, it's not going to cancel. So what I'm going to do, there's different ways of doing this. Let's multiply the bottom by negative 2, for example. So I'm going to multiply that side by negative 2 and this side by negative 2. So I get 2x minus 4y equals, and this answer is going to be positive 38. Now, when I line these up and I add down, so now this I don't have to pay attention to anymore. I'm going to add down. I'm going to get 5x. Notice how my y's now cancel, equals, and then negative 23 plus 38, that's the same thing as 38 minus 23. which is 15. Then I divide both sides by 5. And I get x equals 3, which is the first term in the solution. And then here I notice there's only one answer choice with 3 is x. So I know my answer is B. Again, this is a time test. I'm trying to find shortcuts. There's no reason to go back and solve for y if the only answer choice with 3 is B and I don't have to. So trying to cut down on that extra work. Okay, here we have a function problem. I see one of these on every test as well. They might be at different difficulty levels, like I said in the beginning of the video, but this topic will come up on every single test. And it always runs the same. There's always a constant, so you have to first, sorry guys. Let me go back to where we were. Here we go. You have to first solve for the constant and then you can solve the problem. So here it tells us that when I put in a 4 for x, my answer is 8. So if I do that, I should be able to solve for what a is, and then I can then solve. So it's a two-stepper. Okay. So 8 equals a times 4 squared plus 24. So 4 squared is 16, so 8 equals 16a plus 24. Now I'm going to subtract 24. Sometimes these positive, negative things throws people off. This is the same thing as 24 minus 8 and then making it negative. So this is actually a negative 16 equals 16a. Divide both sides by 16, and I get a is equal to negative 1. Now, notice how negative 1 is an answer choice. However, they didn't ask me what the value of a was, the constant. That is the trick answer. They asked me what g of negative 4 is. So I have to replug negative 4 in for x with a negative 1 in for a, and then that is my answer. So I'm going to do it up here so we have more space. So g of x is equal to, now I have to put in negative 1, and then we're going to put in a negative 4 squared plus 24. And now this has to happen first, this negative 4 squared, which is a positive 16, but then I'm multiplying it by negative 1, so that's a negative 16 plus 24. So don't get thrown off by the positive and negative situation. And then a negative 16 plus 24 is the same thing as 24 minus 16. So my answer is actually 8, not this trick answer. And I'm sure some of those other answers you might have gotten had you not put the correct minus sign. So just watch out for that. They're going to have, especially on these later problems, they're going to do tricks in the answer choices. And you're going to think, oh my God, I got it right. My answer choice is there. Not necessarily. Just because the answer you got's in the answer choices, they have found what the most common wrong answers are and they put those in there. So just be mindful. Okay, we want to know, okay, whenever it asks this is equal, you have to set the two equations equal to each other. So that is the first step that I'm going to do. And I'm going to solve for x, which is the number of weeks when the two things are going to be equal. Okay, so let's set these equal to each other first. Okay, now let's combine like terms. Let's subtract 1.75 from both sides. Make sure I'm dropping my decimal down properly. And then here, let's subtract 0.25x. making sure my decimals are aligned properly and the proper decimals. So then I get 0.60 equals 0.15x. Now I know decimals can sometimes be confusing. So if I multiply both sides by 100, you get 60 equals 15x, just to make it easy on your brain. And then you divide by 15, which I know is 4. Now, again, they might have had 4 on the answer choices. That would have been sneaky, but they don't. This just tells us the weeks after July, but they want to know the price of pound per beef at 4 weeks. So I still have to plug in another 2-step problem here. I have to plug in a 4 for x in the beef equation, not the chicken. So I'm going to plug in a 4 for x, and I'm going to get 0.25 times 4, which is 1, and then 1 plus 2.35 is 3.35. Choice D is my answer. Okay, problem 12. A line in the xy plane passes through the origin and has a slope of 1/7. Which of the following points lies on the line? Now here you have to know one piece of information, and then this is very easy. The 1 is how much you go over. The 7, the bottom part of the equation, is how much you go up. So you're going over 1, up 7, over 1, up 7, which means point B would be on the line, as would, 2,14 or 3,21. All these points would be on this line. Good. Okay, we're getting there. We're almost done with the multiple choice, and then we have a few fill-ins, and then we're done. So, if x is greater than 3, which of the following is equivalent? These, I also like to use my shortcut where I choose numbers for the variables. So here, let's just say we got to give x a number, okay? So we'll just give x a number of, we'll say 2. Again, I don't want to pick 1 or 0 just so I don't get multiple answers that work, and then I got to go back and try a different number. So I'm going to say x equals 2, which would give me 1 over 4 plus 1 over 5. Okay, now I have to add this section. So hopefully you remember this from, 4th grade. Whenever you learned about adding fractions, you need common denominators. So here I'm going to turn them both to 20. So I'm going to multiply top and bottom by 5, and this one I'm going to multiply top and bottom by 4. So I'm going to get 5 over 20 plus 4 over 20, which is 9 over 20. So then I get 1 over 9 over 20, which is the same thing as 20 over 9. Now I'm going to plug in 2 in for x into all my answer choices and see which one gives me a 20 over 9. So right away, I don't even have to do all of these because I know C and D are wrong. That's kind of nice. So I only got to do the top 2. And in fact, I'm just going to focus on the bottom, trying to get a 9. I know 2 squared plus 5 times 2, this is not going to give me a 9. This is not going to work. And in fact, here it works really nicely. 2 times 2 is 4, plus 5 is 9. Again, if I had a lot more time, I would check the top 2, but we're not going to do that. I already know it's B. Okay, if 3x minus y equals 12, what is the value of 8 to the x power over 2 to the y power? Okay, this is a great trick question. We're right at the end. 14 and 15 in the multiple choice are the 2 hardest in the section, as well as the last one in the fill-ins. So I already know that there's probably a trick here, and a lot of students, the normal answer people want to pick is D, because we're only given one equation, and we're always taught you cannot solve when you're only given one equation, so of course it has to be D. However, if I can manipulate this to give me this, I can solve this. So actually D is a trick. So if you see something that seems too good to be true, it's probably a trick. Okay, now you do have to know your exponent rules for this problem. If you don't know them, you're going to have a hard time. You probably won't be able to solve it. Now, with exponents, you need to get the same base. So I know that 8 is equal to 2 to the third power. So I'm going to rewrite this to 2 to the third x over 2y. Now, when you're dividing exponents, it's the same thing as subtracting. Again, you just would have to know this from having your exponent rules memorized. So this is the same thing as 3x minus y. Now, you probably noticed something really interesting. The earlier part of the problem tells me that 3x minus y is 12. So this is the same thing as 2 to the 12th, and that's why it's actually A and not the trick answer of D. Don't get tricked. Don't get tricked. Okay. We are in the last one, which the test makers have found is the most difficult. So I want to reiterate this. If you're totally stumped, keep going on, because the fill-ins get easy again before they get hard. So don't waste all your time on this last problem of the multiple choice. Okay, for this one, what I'm seeing here is what I like to call like foiling, which stands for first, outside, inside, last. And that's how you get that. Oh my God, I cannot type right now. That's how you get FOIL. That's what it stands for. So I know most of you have learned this, but it might have been a while. So you're multiplying these first two terms. When you multiply them, they give you this term. So from the problem, I know A plus B equals 8 from right here, but I also know that A times B equals 15, which is really important because now I can figure out that A and B have to be 5 and 3. Now what I don't know which one is which, but I do know that they're 5 and 3 because you have to multiply the first in the FOIL. Now outside and then inside. And then the last makes sense because 2 times 7 is 14. That's how they get that. So my equation for C has to be the outside-inside equation. So 7ax plus 2bx equals cx. Okay, this is really important because now, for this, you can ignore the x's right here. So we can actually just write it like this just to make it super easy. Like I said before, you have two possible values because I don't know if A is 5 and B is 3 or A is 3 and B is 5. So you're going to have to plug in both. So if I put in 5 for A and 3 for B, I get 35 plus 6 equals C. And then that equals 41. So here I see a 41. So that's going to be my right answer. Again, I'm not going to do a lot of extra work. If you plug in the 3 in for A and the 5 in for B, you're going to get 31. If you have extra time at the end of the test, of course, go back. But a lot of students don't. So don't do the extra work unless you finish everything and then go back, because it's really not good if you've gone through the whole test and you haven't at least looked at every problem. Okay, now we have the 5 that are fill-ins, meaning you don't have multiple choice. You have to bubble in actual numbers as your answer, and there's only one answer. So again, these first couple should be pretty easy. If t is greater than 0, t squared minus 4 equals 0 is the value of t. Okay, so I can add 4 to both sides. So I know t squared equals 4. Then I find the square root. So t equals 2. Now, of course, negative 2 would have also worked. However, we know t is greater than 0 from the problem. So it actually is only one answer, and that's 2. Okay. We have this lake, and this represents x, which is what we're trying to solve for. And then they give us some numbers here, and they tell us respectively, meaning that the first segment in the list is the first number, the second segment's the second. So AB is 1800. So I'm going to go ahead and put that on my photo. EB is 1400. So that goes to that. Then BD is 700. This is probably the hardest part of it, making sure you line everything up properly. And CD is 800. And then they tell us that these two angles are the same, and that's the key part of this. Meaning the ratio of this line to this line has to be the same as the ratio of this line to this line, which is our answer. And they actually gave us a number we don't need. We do not need the 1800 to solve this problem, which is what makes this a little bit trickier. You're given numbers that you don't actually need to solve the problem. So the way I'm going to set this up is a ratio 7 over 800 has to be equal to, so these two lines are the same, so I have to put them on both on the top, 1400 over x. And as you could see, all that happened was we multiplied top and bottom by 2, and so the bottom has to be 1600, and that's your answer. Okay, 3 more to go. Oh, a systems of equations, another one of their favorites. What is the value of x? Okay, I know we're supposed to find x, but here we already have, it's already set up to find y. So I'm just going to quickly find y real fast, since I can just subtract and cancel. So I'm going to actually put this on top to make it easier for me. So x plus 2y equals negative 25. X plus y equals negative 9. And then I'm going to subtract. You can either add or subtract. Here I'm going to subtract because I want the x's to cancel. And that way I only get 1y, just to make it even easier. Now remember, I'm subtracting negative 9, which is the same thing as adding negative 9. So what I'm really doing is negative 25 plus 9, which is the same thing as 25 minus 9, and then just making that a negative. That's how it's easiest for me to remember in my own brain, because I know this stuff can get confusing. So that's actually a negative 16. Now that's why I have to remember they want x. So x minus 16 equals negative 9. I add a 16 to both sides. That's the same thing as 16 minus 9, okay? Which I know is 7. So x is equal to 7. Okay, we have a trig problem, also very common. I see probably 1 or 2 trig problems on every one of these tests. The key here is you have to memorize something called SOHCAHTOA. SOHCAHTOA. And that stands for sine equals opposite over hypotenuse, cosine equals adjacent over hypotenuse, tangent equals opposite over adjacent. So this you need to have memorized, and they do not give it to you on the test. So just remember SOHCAHTOA, just say it a bunch of times and you'll get it. So they're telling me I have a right triangle. and then they have an angle X here, and then they tell me the sine is 4 over 5. So sine is opposite over hypotenuse. So 4 would be here, 5 would be there. Now it doesn't matter if you want to label the other angle X, it doesn't matter. Now, this last angle, since a triangle has 180 degrees, this is a 90-degree angle. That means the two remaining angles have to add up to 90 degrees. So if this angle is X, whatever angle you have left has to be 90 minus X. So they want the cosine of this angle over here, which is adjacent over hypotenuse. Adjacent over hypotenuse, which is 4 over 5. So actually my answer is 4 over 5. Last problem here. This doesn't seem too challenging. I'm just going to put this in for A here. So 2 and then 5 square root 2. That is not a good looking 5. There we go. Equals square root of 2x. Now I want to get, well, first of all, I can just multiply. This just becomes 10 square root 2 equals the square root of 2x. Now I want to get x by itself. So the way I undo a square root is I have to square both sides here. So what I'm really doing is 10 square root 2 times 10 square root 2 equals 2x, because I just undid it on that side. So then I get 100, and then a square root times a square root is just what's in the middle. So 100 times 2 equals 2x. So x is 100. For that one, you do have to know a little bit of algebra, but it's not too complicated if you just understand your square roots and exponents a little bit. Okay, almost done. We're going to, oh no, we are done. That's the end of the fill-ins, and the next section is the calculator section. So I'm going to stop the video here. I hope this was super helpful to all of you. Whether you're taking the test or know someone who is, or you're just kind of doing this for fun to brush up on things, I hope you found it helpful. If you enjoyed this kind of content, I have a few other videos where I'm solving puzzles and IQ tests, so be sure to check those out, as well as a few videos about the SAT and the ACT if you are going to be taking them. I do also have private tutoring, so if you would like one-on-one virtual tutoring, you can email me at hellosharpcookie@gmail.com. Please give this video a like if you found it helpful and you found the explanations helpful. I would love to do more of these, and of course, please leave your comments. I would love to engage in the comment section. Okay, that's all I have for today. Take care. Bye.